So I have to admit, the pessimist in me was expecting the worst after such a strong first episode that stuck closely to the source material. I guess you could say I thought that it was too good to be true. But much to my surprise, The Last of Us Episode 2 kept that same energy. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
So I don't know if this trend is going to continue, but this episode started with yet another pre-outbreak flashback that basically ties back into the origins of the fungus. Now, these types of side stories were not part of the original game, but I do absolutely love what they are bringing to the show.
I like it a lot.
Just by giving us a little bit more backstory about how this whole thing started. It just adds another dimension to the already tragic story they are trying to tell. These flashbacks take things a bit further than the typical Joel and Ellie perspective we are used to. It shows us that this was in fact a global threat. This flashback in particular takes us to pre-outbreak Indonesia, where a mycology expert gets her first look at a dead body that has been colonized by the fungus, after this person was apparently bitten by another unknown person.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
And her solution to this problem is probably the most chilling thing in this entire episode. She flat out says it's time to bomb the city and kill everyone in it. Doesn't that make the impending threat seem that much more dire? I just thought that this little moment was a great and welcome addition to the lore. It makes it even worse when she requests to be taken to her family. It's just another way of her saying this is probably going to be the end of all of us.
We're gonna die!
It just felt like they were upping the stakes and showing the audience how this impacted people on a larger scale. When we finally return to Joel, Tess, and Ellie, we are thrust into this situation where Joel is reluctant to be around Ellie. Obviously because of all the tragedy he's experienced already. He's expecting the worst and assuming because Ellie is infected, that there's no way that she won't turn at some point because there's been no precedent in this world set for that.
That makes sense.
It really kind of showed you Joel's current mindset, especially when he admits that he's willing to take Ellie back to the quarantine zone, where he knows she will be executed if she is found.
If he dies, he dies.
Next, their trek through the ruins of the city begins. And I have to say, once again, they absolutely nailed the look and feel of the game in live action. Everything from how the screen kind of blurs when they're exiting a dark building into a well-lit city, to how the environment consists of buildings overgrown with plants and flooded in some areas. Everything about this show is working for me aesthetically. And like in the game, they encounter obstacles that force them to go in a different direction.
Me, right?
Eventually, they find their way to the museum, and this is where we get our first real look at a fully infected person, in a situation where the main characters now must deal with them. You get a lot of hiding and sneaking around as you would expect, and I really appreciated the fact that they used real actors as the infected, and they weren't just all done with CGI. And once they are found out, Joel even has to fight off a couple of them. And it was at this moment that in my mind I said, okay, they absolutely knocked this out of the park.
It was out of here.
These moments were pretty intense also, much like they were in the game. And the combination of just hearing that clicking noise off in the distance somewhere, and not really knowing what's around every corner, it really kept me invested in this moment. Throughout the episode, Tess is portrayed as the more optimistic of the two between her and Joel, and it does create an interesting dynamic between them, especially considering, yes, they already have a pre-established relationship, and Joel is essentially being forced into this situation by Tess, and there's a little part of her that is hoping that this mission will restore a little bit of Joel's humanity.
Why do you cry?
But unfortunately, before that happens, Joel has to experience a little bit more tragedy. So we find out that when they were attacked in the museum, Tess was actually bitten. And Tess uses the severity of her wound and how it looks to convince Joel that Ellie is in fact as important as everyone says she is. And after Joel kills yet another infected person at the Firefly Rendezvous, where everyone is dead by the way, the noise of the gunshot alerts a nearby horde of infected.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
And this is where a difficult decision needs to be made. I will say I wasn't really sure why that gunshot alerted the horde, but none of the gunshots in the museum did, but I guess you could consider that a minor nitpick. Anyway, Tess decides to take it upon herself and sacrifice herself by staying behind and blowing up herself and the incoming horde just so Joel and Ellie can get away. Now, I don't know if we spent enough time in the show with Tess for this to be as impactful for the audience as it is when you were playing the game, but it's certainly going to have an impact on Joel, and that's really what's important. This moment of sacrifice is also different from the game. In the game, it's military remnants that kill Tess and not the horde, but I do like the change for the show because it keeps all of the focus on the infected for right now. And it brings everything full circle given how this episode started.
Because it's all part of the plan.
As far as the way that Ellie is being portrayed in this show, which was one of my only complaints from episode 1. I'm still not entirely sold on her more mean-spirited demeanor, but they did have a nice moment in this episode where she pretends to be checking into a hotel that they're at, and that moment did remind me a bit more of the game version of Ellie. There's still time for this portrayal to grow on me, I guess. No pun intended. But overall, again, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode of The Last of Us. I'm really digging how they're sticking close to the source material, but also making some modifications and additions to the story that enhance the whole experience rather than take away from what we already know from the game. Which is all you can really ask for when a story that you love is being adapted into a new medium.
You
Make me happy.
Y'all be cool. Right on.